Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. We're surrounded by applications now, aren't we? I think most businesses have hundreds, some businesses even have thousands, but I do think a lot of that depends on what you define as an application. I had a line manager once that suggested that an Excel spreadsheet that was crucial to a business could also be defined as an application, but I disagreed with him, but maybe I was wrong. But software has already eaten the world. That's the point I want to get across here. But thankfully, choosing your next business application can be made much easier with a business app recommendation engine, such as GetApp, which is one that I've discovered recently. But I wanted to learn more about how GetApp recently investigated the benefits of analytics in HR, because I wanted to learn more about how using analytics to spot trends could be beneficial for companies, especially as employee turnover can cost a 100-person business up to $2.6 million a year. It's a great topic, so come with me all the way to Washington, D.C., so we can speak with Lauren Maffio of GetApp, who's going to share all the details in that report and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'm happy to. So my name's Lauren Maffeo, and I'm an associate principal analyst at GetApp, which I always describe as TripAdvisor for B2B software. We serve businesses of all sizes with a special focus on small and mid-sized businesses, and GetApp exists to help these small and mid-sized businesses find the best tools and technologies to grow their businesses. So the idea, if you are a SMB owner and you need any type of software for your business, whether it's marketing, HR, business intelligence. If you need that software, you would go to getapp.com, read LinkedIn verified reviews of thousands of software products. You would filter for the features you need and ultimately choose the best tool for your business needs and budget. At GetApp, we have a team of analysts that cover various software markets, doing market research and analysis of those software markets. And I cover business intelligence, which encompasses everything from predictive analytics to data mining techniques, things of that nature. And increasingly, business intelligence is becoming more relevant to all lines of business, not just the technology office in an organization. So it's becoming very interesting to work in this space at this time.
And I love that TripAdvisor analogy because instantly you just know exactly what you do straight away. But I am conscious we will have people tuning in for the first time, and they might understand that GetApp is an online resource for businesses to discover, compare, choose, and review those business apps. And there is so many of them out there. But can I ask you give a little overview on the kind of problems that you're solving for businesses with GetApp?
Sure. So GetApp is actually based in Europe. We were founded in Barcelona, and the main office is still there in Barcelona today. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm based in North America. I work in the Roslyn, Virginia office because GetApp was actually acquired by Gartner, which is an American IT research and advisory firm, in 2015. And we are part of a business unit called Gartner Digital Markets, which is comprised of 3 software buyer websites, GetApp, Capterra, and Software Advice. And I bring that up because the purpose of all 3 sites under Gartner is to serve software buyers and software vendors. And those 2 markets are served around the world. So if you are a software vendor, you are able to be listed in software directories across GDM for the buyers to find you. And if you are a software buyer looking to add new technologies to your organization, you can use all 3 websites to find the best tools and technologies for your business. The way we differentiate ourselves ourselves among the three brands is that GetApp tends to be for a more tech-savvy buyer. So not just technologists in the form of developers and CTOs, but also people who have made purchasing decisions of cloud software for their businesses before and tend to have a stronger sense of what they're looking for when they buy software. By contrast, Software Advice has a team of software advisors, and so the goal of analysts like myself is always to get software buyers on the call with advisors so that they can get walked through the selection process. Whereas when they come to GetApp, they tend to have a stronger idea of what they're looking for. And my job as an analyst is to provide content that can help them lead to a more self-selected independent choice.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today was after reading the State of Analytics in HR report over on your website. So to begin with, what is data analytics in HR, just for people outside of the industry?
Sure, that's a great question. Data analytics in HR applies business intelligence tactics around data, whether it's collecting, analyzing, modeling, or visualizing data. In HR, it takes those tactics and applies them to the business problem of employee engagement, from initial recruitment to high-level retainment. And HR leaders who apply data analytics in HR apply those data techniques to data within their specific sector. And so we try to encourage HR leaders to not just think about using data analytics for recruitment, although that's a fairly easy solve in the scheme of things. We also try to encourage them to use data analytics to think about how they can retain their talent. And this is especially important because in the US, we're in a very bullish job market where people who are looking for new jobs have a wide range of choice. And so attracting and retaining top talent is a top challenge for businesses of all sizes. What inspired me to write this piece was attending the All Things Open conference in Raleigh, North Carolina in 2018. And I heard from a data scientist who works at a large multinational financial institution. This woman does predictive modeling in the HR sector, and she said that by doing so, she found a correlation between the length of an employee's commute and their likelihood of leaving the organization within the following year. So they found that of all the data points analyzed, length of time from living from the office was correlated with a higher likelihood of leaving the organization. And so they were able to take that data to find the correlation, and then they are able to now act upon people who are most likely to leave. So even if someone doesn't seem unhappier, or if they are not openly complaining about the length of their commute, if you can use the data points in your system to check in and see who's at risk, you can then have proactive conversations with them to see if they need more flexible options like remote work days. And if nothing else, that shows goodwill and boosts business loyalty, because losing top talent is extremely expensive for organizations. So taking that proactive approach using analytics is really important. And I think that's going to separate great HR departments from their peers moving forward.
And for businesses that do have those data points and those analytics, how can they use those analytics in HR and set their teams up for greater success this year?
I think the main thing that businesses of all sizes can do is purchase business intelligence software with the intent to have leaders in all lines of business use it. Historically, analytics and data have been the domain of one team or one person in an organization, and it's typically the chief technology officer or the chief information officer and their team. And so I think what's going to differentiate businesses who use analytics well moving forward is having HR leaders, marketing leaders, customer success leaders all access the same business intelligence tool so that they can apply analytics to their particular lines of business and then show that relevance of their data to the larger organization. So, for example, one thing that differentiates predictive analytics in particular is its ease of use. So business leaders who are comfortable using cloud software like Salesforce should be able to use predictive analytics within software as well. And this differs from more advanced data science techniques like predictive modeling, which often require advanced degrees in math or computer science, and data scientists are in very high demand across businesses of all sizes. So using predictive analytics is a fairly easy win for HR leaders who want to use predictive analytics to solve particular HR problems like recruitment or retainment. And so I think that's what's going to set businesses apart moving forward, is sharing business intelligence techniques with leaders in every business function, not just keeping it siloed within the technology part of the business.
And I'm curious, do you actually have any examples of how employees can actually use data analytics to improve staff retention, just to help people listening just understand what a game changer this is?
Yeah, so I would say the retainment question is very relevant. And so you would really want to use a data-informed strategy for keeping your people. We already touched on this a bit earlier in terms of using particular data points to find what is most likely to make your people leave. For this multinational financial company I mentioned earlier, the highest predictor of leaving was length of time from the office. In your organization, it might be a data point that's very different. And so if someone wants to use predictive analytics specifically for retention, you would want to do two things. You would want to first find the employees who are most at risk of leaving, and then you would want to target those people with the right incentives. And what's important here is to focus on retaining a very specific group of employees. You don't want to apply the same retention strategy to all of your employees. This is actually a big win for HR because most HR teams have a fair amount of data on their employees, ranging from titles, ages, incomes, promotions, etc. And so you could use predictive analytics techniques within software like tree analyses, logistic regression to find the employees who are at most risk of leaving. And then once these functions are fed into the software, it can find patterns among the data that you've given it and scan those patterns among your database of employees. It uses that data to find patterns and then make predictions about which employees are at the highest risk of leaving. So in simple terms, HR teams can use predictive analytics to find probability based on your specific company data, and then come up with strategies to keep those specific people who are at highest risk of leaving the business.
And from those conversations you're having with clients, combined with your industry expertise and insights, what are the HR analytic trends that we should be watching out for in 2020?
Well, I see a fair amount of doomsday predictions in the press about AI replacing humans. And so I feel obliged to say that won't happen in 2020, especially not in HR, which, as the name suggests, is a human-based part of the business. And so I don't see AI being advanced enough to replace HR professionals altogether. But my colleague, Brian Westfall, who covers the HR sector for our sister site, Capterra, recently wrote a piece on HR trends that will define not just 2020, but the actual decade ahead of us. And he had some predictions about what businesses should be on the lookout for. He actually predicted that there will be a rollback of employee perks and benefits, and that by 2022, most employers will offer employees 25% fewer perks and benefits than they do today. That's due in large part to the fact that here in the US, there's a 38% chance of an economic recession by August 2020, as predicted by the US Federal Reserve. And the likelihood of a recession only goes up from there. So when that happens, businesses will have no choice but to make cost-cutting measures. And the reality is that job seekers prioritize core benefits like healthcare, paid time off during, and especially meaning during their job search. We're increasingly seeing data that millennials want a connection between the tasks they do each day to a larger purpose. And they really actually don't care that much about things like free gym memberships or coffee at the office, especially because the workforce is getting more remote with more and more people working from home. So we predict that on-site benefits will see a cut in the decade ahead, and that will probably start in 2020. So HR leaders should be really getting serious about the things that their people care about the most, not just to retain their staff, but also to see where they can cut costs if they're investing in employee perks that people don't even care about. I'm also going to contradict myself a bit because I just said that AI won't replace people in 2020, but we do predict that there will be a decline in line managers across organizations, specifically that by 2025, 20% of open line manager roles will not be backfilled. And there are a few reasons for that. Gartner, our parent company, predicts that 69% of what managers do today will be automated by 2024. And that doesn't mean that managers themselves will necessarily be out of work, but it does mean that the role of managers will change drastically. And so it means that the core function that line manager serves in businesses will evolve to be more hands-on, because a lot of those rules-based repetitive tasks that they do each day, largely involving technologies, will increasingly be automated by technologies. And so on the HR front, they're going to have to work directly with leaders across all lines of business to figure out what those lines of business need in order to more accurately target the right people and bring them into organizations. And the third trend that we're seeing is a real evolution in performance management. The annual reviews are things that I don't think most people enjoy or find effective. And Gartner says that 82% of HR leaders report that performance management doesn't achieve its primary objective. And so most organizations are actively looking to refine it as is. So we predict that in 2020, in HR, we will start seeing more continuous feedback where people receive notice of how they're doing on a regular basis. And that's due in large part to increases in transparency around performance data in HR software. So technology has made it clear to employees whether they're high or low performers, but even though the performance management process continues to focus on one annual review. And so we think that due to HR software advances, employees will not only take a more active role in designing performance management processes, the feedback loop will be more continuous. And that's due also to data showing that millennial employees want more continuous feedback on their performance.
And I also read that using these kind of analytics to spot trends could be incredibly beneficial for companies. A great stat I read was that employee turnover alone can cost a 100-person business up to 2.6 million per year. It's a phenomenal stat, but can you expand on those findings?
Certainly. So as difficult as it is to recruit great talent, retaining that top talent is a big cost for organizations. And so that's why it's really important for teams to think about how they can use data points to keep the talent that they've got. And that goes back to several examples I gave earlier in this podcast, where it can cost anywhere from employees' annual salary to even more to replace staff that leaves your business. And this is especially important for small businesses because a recent article this month in the Wall Street Journal found that headcount at businesses with fewer than 20 employees was essentially unchanged in 2019. And so that's very different from companies with 500 or more employees who increased their workforces by 2.3%. And this is important for small business hiring because it's the first time that SMBs haven't added to their payrolls since 2010. And that was when businesses of all sizes were recovering from the financial crisis. So and in the US, more than 5.3 million businesses have fewer than 20 employees. So that's important because if it's that difficult to hire great talent, you have to be doing everything in your power to retain the top talent in your organization. So if you're a small business thinking about your workforce, how to motivate them and how to keep them, really your focus should be as high, if not higher, on looking at the talent in your organization and applying data and analytics techniques to keep who's on your team, in large part so that you don't have to overextend on recruitment, because recruitment on behalf of SMBs is at a really difficult point right now. And it's probably a better investment to apply data and analytics to your current staff rather than having to retroactively hire their replacements.
And one of the things I love doing on this Daily Tech podcast is busting a few myths out there. So a question I've got to ask you is, what's the biggest misconception about automation in HR, would you say?
I would say the biggest misconception about automation in HR is this idea that you can outsource roles to machines on a mass scale across HR. And so what I mean by that is this concept that AI is going to replace people. And that's incorrect on various levels. It's incorrect, firstly, because AI is a category of technologies and techniques. So those range from natural language processing to robotics to machine learning. And these are very different types of AI technology. And so when we talk about AI as this monolithic entity, that in itself is incorrect. And then expanding on that a bit, as I mentioned earlier, there's no doubt that automation is going to change almost every role in the workforce. And so those roles' fundamental business value will evolve along with those technology advancements. And it's true that technology like HR software can perform many rules-based repetitive tasks better than people. But most of those tools are still really bad at understanding nuance, especially when it comes to interpreting language. And when you have a business function like HR, which really is very much about interpreting language and nuance, it's easy to see why this gets problematic if you try to outsource complete HR tasks or roles to technology, because resumes and cover letters are full of data, but they're full of what's called unstructured data, which is typically sentences and things that involve a lot of nuance. People in general are full of nuance. And so if your role is to manage employees from recruitment to retainment, automating certain tasks can help, but you should never do so without human oversight. And that's really important because we know, for example, that companies use talent management software to weed out, quote, unqualified candidates by automating the resume reading process. And this intention isn't bad because companies often get inundated with resumes for open roles. And so it's intended to help them confirm which characteristics are essential for each role. And then they can plug those characteristics into software that screens the resumes that come in to help companies save time by presenting select candidates for managers to review. The problem here is that such software often gives too much weight to small differences between candidates that don't actually reflect their suitability for roles. And this causes 62% of employers to admit that qualified candidates slip through the software's cracks and thus never get the job interviews that they're actually qualified for. So my advice is not that you shouldn't be using technology in HR, because you absolutely should. But I think that lack of information about the business value of AI and automation causes businesses to use the software incorrectly. And so I would encourage business leaders to think about which tasks are best suited to computers and HR software, but to always make sure that you have human oversight so that qualified candidates don't slip through your candidate pipeline.
And although it's been several years since I left my IT role behind and working with HR teams, I still get flashbacks from HR software having that bad reputation for being incredibly clunky. So I've got to ask, is that changing? And what is the current state of AI within HR software?
That's a great question. We recently at GetApp wrote an article on HR software that has predictive analytics that users can use for recruiting. And I will be honest, we have 4 tools profiled in this article and no more than that, because that's how high the bar is set. As you mentioned, there are numerous software products across all markets. And the reality is that when it came time for us at GetApp to analyze which cloud HR tools had the functionality that users need to use predictive analytics, we came up with only 4. And when you consider how many tools are out on the market, that's quite a low number. And so at this time, I would say the needs of software users outpace the features that are available in the software market at large, but actually that's good news for software buyers, because it means that you can very easily narrow down your search. One of the top challenges that we see businesses struggle with is knowing where to start their software search and how to find the tools in their line of business that they need, which have the features they need. And so I would actually argue it's good news that there are relatively few HR software tools with predictive analytics, because it helps buyers automatically narrow down their search to 4 tools. And then from there, they can really streamline the software buying process based on their business needs and budget.
Well, we've covered so many talking points today, and I suspect that anybody listening in HR or any business leaders, we could be leaving them with more questions after listening to our conversation. So for those people, can you just remind them where they can find you online, and also contact your team if they are left with any questions?
Absolutely. So business leaders, if they have questions, are free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm on both platforms under my name, which is Lauren Maffeo. And if they want to gain more insights about how to find the best software for their business, they can visit our website at getapp.com, where they can visit various product catalogs that are specific to HR and HR functions. I will also make sure that we include links to the articles I mentioned in the show notes, so that if listeners are looking for predictive analytics for recruiting, or they want to learn more about both data analytics in HR and HR trends that will define the decade, that they can easily access those articles and expand on the points that we covered in this podcast.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that accompanies this podcast episode. I've already enjoyed reading your investigated report into the benefits of analytics in HR. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come on here, share some of the ideas, some of the thought processes behind that with everyone listening. Thanks again.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I know this is the busiest time of year for recruitment, which is why we strategically published this content early in 2020 so that readers can hopefully start using those techniques while they're recruiting for their teams, because I know January and February is typically the time when organizations start recruiting and bringing in talent. So I really hope this is helpful for them.
So GetApp recommend that employees can set their teams up for success in 2020 by auditing HR processes and then using analytics to improve their processes. And also review embedded analytics features to see what tools are already at their team's disposal, and how employers can use data analytics to improve staff retention. But that's just what I took away. But remember, please, let me know your insights and experience within the HR departments and with HR tech, and also the road ahead. And you can do all that and more by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Look for me on social channels at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. I am interested to hear if any of you do struggle with clunky HR business applications, or if all that has gone away now. But whatever it is, even if you've got a question or you want to come on this show, send me a message. And if you don't worry, I'll be right back here, same time, same place tomorrow, and we'll do it all again. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.